We are treating Kelsey's disappearance as a missing persons case at this time.
Was there anything on the TV, do you remember?
Yeah, there was one on the TV. Okay.
This is completely out of character. Kelsey loves her God, she loves her family and friends, and she loves
there was on top of coffee maker.
On Tuesday, Frazee dodged reporters and refused to answer questions.
This is private property. This is a private road.
Patrick, why don't you talk to us? Can you tell us what happened?
The prosecution's final witness, one of Frazee's fellow inmates in county jail, who claims Frazee asked for his help to kill all of the witnesses who were set to testify against him.
Right now to the local mystery gaining national attention, the disappearance of 29-year-old Kelsey Berreth and the investigation into her fiance, the father of her child.
This is the mysterious case of 29-year-old Kelsey Berreth, a pilot and flight instructor who went missing without a trace on November 22nd of 2018. This clip that you're about to watch is the last known footage of Kelsey alive. It is surveillance footage from a Safeway grocery store in Woodland, Colorado, and it shows Kelsey pushing her 1-year-old daughter Caylee in a cart as she makes her way through the store. Kelsey's mother Cheryl became concerned about her after she couldn't get in contact with her for a week. Cheryl called the cops and reported her missing on December the 2nd of 2019. When the cops arrived at Kelsey's apartment to check on her, they found her car parked in a driveway. But her keys and cell phone, as well as some of her other personal belongings, were missing. There was also a stale and uneaten food sitting out on the counter, which was very unlike Kelsey, who usually kept a clean house. The cops spoke with Patrick Frazee, Kelsey's former fiance, who was the last known person to have spoken with Kelsey before her disappearance. At the time, Patrick and Kelsey were no longer living together and had supposedly broken off their engagement. Patrick, who at the time had baby Caylee with him, said that he didn't know anything about Kelsey's whereabouts and hadn't seen her since she dropped off their baby with him, which was supposedly November the 22nd. But Patrick did say that he received a text from Kelsey on November 25th saying that she would be taking a week off from work. Kelsey's employer received a text saying the same thing. But it doesn't take long before law enforcement begins to set their sights on Patrick and question if it's possible that he could have had something to do with Kelsey's disappearance after all. After all, Kelsey had apparently been missing for days, but Patrick had reported it. When they asked him where he thought Kelsey might be, he reminded the cops that because Kelsey was a pilot, she could have jetted off somewhere and just not told anyone. Considering the fact that Kelsey had a 1-year-old daughter who she absolutely adored, made the concept of her just taking off and disappearing on her own accord seem pretty unlikely. Kelsey's mom Cheryl did an interview about her daughter's disappearance on NBC News, bringing nationwide attention to the case. In the interview, Cheryl said that this was not like her daughter to just disappear and not get into contact with anyone.
I still know somebody knows where she's at. Somebody has seen her. There's more information out there. Somebody just needs to realize, to recognize, and to say something.
Has she ever disappeared before?
No. I can't think of anywhere she's ever gone that she hasn't told me. It's just not in her character to just take off and be gone.
Investigators realized that on the last day that Kelsey ever sent out text messages to anyone, her phone pinged in Gooding, Iowa, which is about 800 miles from her home. Nobody has any idea what she would have been doing there, but concerns are continuing to mount. Just like any other missing persons case, the longer that someone is missing, the more unlikely it is, often considered, that they will be found. While at this point the cops were still looking into Patrick, and considering his potential involvement in Kelsey's disappearance, they hadn't named him as an official suspect. And all in all, it really didn't seem like they had much information to go off of.
Good afternoon. I'm Chief Miles DeYoung, Chief of Police for the City of Woodland Park. I'm going to give you a brief timeline and kind of bring you current with where we're at right now. I would first like to start off by just thanking everybody that took the time out to come forward and spread this message of Kelsey being missing and helping us to find her. Kelsey's been missing and been reported missing by her mother, Cheryl, since Sunday, December 2nd at about 12:37 p.m.
At this point, the pressure on the Woodland law enforcement to crack this case was enormous. There were people all around the country talking about Kelsey's disappearance, and they wanted to see some progress.
Officers were able to contact her place of employment at Doss Aviation down in Pueblo, Colorado, and were advised that they had received a text from Kelsey's phone on the 25th of November stating that she would not be into work the following week. Officers from the Woodland Park Police Department did respond to Kelsey's residence on December 2nd and performed a community caretaker search of her residence to see if they could locate her. She was not inside her residence.
The chief of law enforcement asked the public for their help in trying to locate Kelsey.
We have not identified anyone as a suspect and are asking the public for any information that might help us find her.
A candlelight vigil was held for Kelsey, and it was very widely attended, despite the frigid temperatures.
Gotta tell you, it is very chilly up here, but the cold weather certainly not deterring anyone in the Woodland Park community from coming to this vigil. I'm going to step out of the way. So there's about 50 to 60 folks as more people continue to file in, and they're just about to get started. We did see Kelsey Berreth's mother, Cheryl, walk in as well. And really, we spoke with the organizers of this vigil a couple minutes ago. They said they do not know her. They don't know the family. They just felt it was the right thing to do with this story that has captured the attention of this community.
While many friends and strangers alike came out to this prayer vigil to show their support, strangely, Patrick was not in attendance. This was something that people noticed and wondered about. Around this time, with desperation growing, a $25,000 reward was posted for any information that would lead to Kelsey's whereabouts. 4 days after Kelsey was declared a missing person, there was a surprising twist in the case when the cops obtained a search warrant for Patrick Frazee's home. At this point, Patrick was no longer cooperating with the investigation and had supposedly sent Kelsey's mom a cryptic text saying that he had had enough and wasn't going to deal with things anymore. This obviously made him look pretty suspicious. But when Patrick found out that the cops were looking into him as a potential suspect, he was furious and issued a statement saying that he hadn't done anything wrong and that he had helped with the investigation in every way that he had been asked.
Frazee released a statement through his attorney saying his phone was searched. He submitted photographs and DNA. The statement further explains that he was only notified of the press conference an hour before it started and reads, quote, Mr. Frazee hopes and prays for Miss Berreth's return.
But for someone who supposedly had nothing to do with Kelsey's disappearance, he sure got angry when anybody asked him about it.
On Tuesday, Frazee dodged reporters and refused to answer questions.
This is private property. This is a private road.
Patrick, why don't you talk to us? Can you tell us what happened?
Back at Kelsey's home, Cheryl was over, and she was doing some investigating of her own as she tried to find any possible sign that might be of help in finding her daughter. She ended up finding what looked to be a blood stain on the underside of the toilet seat. She believed this was suspicious and reported it to the cops. Sure enough, the cops agreed that it was blood, and so they took a closer look inside the bathroom and other areas of the home. It was then that they discovered traces of blood inside of the toilet, in the bathtub, on the towel rack, on the walls, and on the floor. Clearly, this was not there because of some sort of accident. It appeared that something had happened and someone had attempted to clean it up. Was it possible that Kelsey had been murdered inside of her own home? Just days later, on December 21st, the cops arrested Patrick Frazee.
Today we arrested Patrick Frazee on charges of first-degree murder of Kelsey Berreth, and he is currently being held in the Teller County Jail. As a reminder, Patrick Frazee is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
On one hand, it was a relief that someone had finally been arrested and charged in connection with the case. However, it was also devastating news for Kelsey's family, who up until this point had been holding out hope that she might be still found alive. Now it appeared that the cops no longer believed this to be the case. It was decided that Patrick would be held without bail, and the cops said that there might be a second person to be arrested in the case in the coming days. They did not, however, reveal publicly what sort of evidence they had found on Patrick. In addition to being charged with the actual murder of Kelsey, Patrick was also charged with multiple counts of solicitation of murder. So what this means is that they had reason to believe he had attempted to kill Kelsey several times before he was ultimately successful. Several days later, a second person was arrested in connection to this case. This was a 32-year-old woman named Crystal Lee.
Who is Crystal Lee?
Crystal Lee is a rodeo queen from Idaho. She's very well known. And she's Patrick Frazee's ex-girlfriend. They'd known each other for over a decade. She's the bread and butter to this case.
That's Crystal Lee wearing a police jacket and hat.
Can you point to the area where you saw and clean blood up on the wall?
Interestingly, Crystal lives not far from the area that Kelsey's cell phone last pinged at. The cops believe that it wasn't Kelsey who sent those last texts out to Patrick and to Kelsey's job, but rather Crystal.
Evidence in the case has now been collected in Idaho. The police and sheriff's departments in Twin Falls, Idaho, say they got a request last weekend from investigators here in Colorado to search for evidence there. In a statement posted online last night, they said they were able to gather some evidence and share it with the FBI, CBI, and Woodland Park Police, but the nature of that evidence was not disclosed.
The cops charged Crystal with tampering with evidence in connection to the murder investigation, which she pled guilty to. So while the cops aren't revealing everything they've discovered so far, we know that Crystal must have in some way tried to cover up what happened to Kelsey, presumably as a way of trying to protect her ex-boyfriend, Patrick. But things are about to get even more interesting because, as a way of now trying to get herself in less trouble, she agreed to testify against Patrick, which she ends up revealing is pretty shocking. Basically, Kelsey admitted that she and Patrick had been having an on and off again relationship for about 10 years. Some of this time was supposedly when Patrick was already engaged to Kelsey. But when things fell apart between Patrick and Kelsey, he decided he wanted her gone. Why? Because Patrick wanted full custody of his daughter Caylee, and he knew that as long as Kelsey was around, he likely wasn't going to get that. But that wasn't his only motive to kill Kelsey. Kelsey also had a life insurance policy that she had taken out not long before her disappearance. Even though they weren't together anymore, Patrick was still listed as the beneficiary, which would mean he would get the money if Kelsey died. Now, Crystal was a nurse, which meant that she had access to a lot of different medications. She and Patrick came up with the idea that she would steal drugs from work and attempt to poison Kelsey by putting them in a cup of Starbucks coffee. While Crystal supposedly got as far as taking the coffee over to Kelsey's home, she ultimately couldn't go through with it. Patrick, irritated that she hadn't followed through with her end of the plan, decided that he would take care of the job himself. And the way he ended up doing it is honestly pretty disturbing. On Thanksgiving Day, Patrick went over to Kelsey's house. Evidence of his visit was later found on security footage, but Kelsey let him in the house having no idea that he actually had a baseball bat concealed in one of the bags he brought with him. She did not suspect that she had any reason to be afraid of this man. After all, he was the father of her daughter, who was playing in the next room. Patrick told Kelsey that he wanted to play a game with her with some candles that he had brought. He was going to blindfold her, let her smell the candles, and see if she could tell which one was which. Obviously, this was a pretty random thing to want to do, but Kelsey must not have suspected anything because she went along with it. But as soon as she was blindfolded, Patrick pulled out the baseball bat and clapped her in the head with it about 15 times. Her last words were reportedly, "Please stop." After Kelsey was dead, Patrick called Crystal and told her to drive over, all the way from Idaho, and to help him clean up the murder scene. Crystal, who was supposedly too terrified to say no, agreed. She got to the house and walked into the kind of scene you only see in movies. There was supposedly blood everywhere. There was so much blood that it would take her more than 4 hours to try to clean it up. So now that Crystal is already in legal trouble, she agreed to go with the cops and her attorney to the house where all this had happened and show them where specifically the blood was.
Okay, it's 11:15, again on the 21st of December 2018. We're inside Kelsey's apartment with Crystal. Her attorney's with us. So tell me, when you came in, what did you see?
When I first walked in, I found all over the floor and on the wall.
It's pretty crazy that Crystal is able to talk so calmly about what must have been an absolutely horrific murder scene.
And then what else was in here? I know it's kind of torn up right now, but...
There were 2 chairs right there with a TV on top of it.
All right.
There was a bunch of baby toys around the front.
Okay. And when did you start cleaning up first?
I started picking up things that were splattered that I would have a hard time getting out of.
At this point, Crystal is already in pretty major legal trouble. She got caught cleaning up a murder scene, and now it is in her best interest to cooperate with the investigation as much as she possibly can.
Okay. Can you specifically show us, in the interview you told us that you had left blood spots. Can you show me where you left those? And then I'd like Eric to We'll have to take a photograph of those areas. Okay. All right. All right, so can you go ahead and point to the first one and just let Erica tell you where to, when you're ready to take the picture?
Now, but it was maybe right there.
So basically, Crystal was not able to clean the blood out of everything, so what she couldn't salvage, she just stuffed in the garbage. In fact, she admitted to filling 6 garbage bags with Kelsey's belongings. The murder scene was so grisly that Crystal even had to clean up several of Kelsey's teeth, which were supposedly scattered about. The fact that she was so willing to just go along with all of this shows that she either was truly terrified of him or truly in love with him. When Crystal was done cleaning up the scene, Patrick also wanted her to help him get rid of Kelsey's body, but that was apparently where she drew the line. She said he would have to do that part on his own. As far as she knew, Patrick had taken Kelsey's body to a family farm to dispose of it, but tragically, despite extensive efforts to find it, Kelsey's remains have never been recovered. Now, despite Crystal's testimony against him and the extensive evidence the detectives were able to find, Patrick continued to deny that he had anything to do with Kelsey's death. So after the case went to trial, his fate was put into the hands of a jury. They took 3 hours before coming up with their decision.
A verdict in a case that has made national headlines in Colorado, a jury finding Patrick Frazee guilty on all counts in the death of his fiancée, that young mom, Kelsey Berreth. Frazee was accused of bludgeoning Berreth to death while their 1-year-old daughter was in a nearby room. Crystal was the main witness that helped get Patrick convicted, but there was also another very unexpected person who played a key role.
The prosecution's final witness, one of Frazee's fellow inmates in county jail, who claims Frazee asked for his help to kill all of the witnesses who were set to testify against him.
So clearly, Patrick Frazee was never what could be considered a very intelligent criminal. But at the end of the day, all of the horrible things he did caught up to him, and he had to face his fate.
A Colorado man will spend the rest of his life behind bars for murdering his fiancée. Yesterday, a jury convicted Patrick Frazee after deliberating for just 3.5 hours. A judge sentenced Frazee to life plus 156 years without parole for beating Kelsey Berreth to death. Her body has never been found.
You might be thinking, what about Crystal? Clearly she played a major role in all of this, and she should have to face the consequences too. Well, this is where things get a bit controversial. Crystal made a deal with the prosecutors. She said she would testify against Patrick if it meant a less severe punishment for her. So, in January of 2020, she received just 3 years behind bars. It's pretty crazy that someone who literally destroyed evidence and cleared up a murder scene would get such little time. And the prosecutors said it was kind of like making a deal with the devil. But they did what they had to do to make sure they took down the person who was actually the one wielding the bat that killed Kelsey. And that person was Patrick. Luckily, Patrick will never get out of prison ever again. Do you believe Crystal got what she deserved? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.